The noise came first, a deep, violent thunder rolling across the hills of Road America in 1973. Louder than anything else on track, louder than the crowd, louder than the announcer's crackling speakers, louder than common sense. People in the grandstand stopped mid-conversation. Heads turned. Beer cups froze halfway to lips. When the car crested the hill, it didn't look real. It looked like something from the future that had crashed into the 1970s by mistake. Low, wide, aggressive in a way that seemed almost personal. The bodywork was sculpted around function, not beauty. Every curve existed to cheat the air. Every vent existed to survive the heat. And the terrifying part, it wasn't even trying that hard. The driver was short-shifting, lifting early, saving the machinery, and still pulling away from everything else on the circuit like they were standing still. Most people think motorsports rules exist to keep racing fair, to give everyone a chance, to create competition that entertains crowds and sells tickets. But sometimes rules exist because something is simply too fast to be allowed to live. And this engine terrified an entire racing series into rewriting the law. You think you know why it disappeared, but the real reason is far darker and far more brutal. Because this wasn't just an engine, it was a weapon, and weapons get controlled. In the early 1970s, North American road racing was wild, almost lawless, the kind of freedom that seems impossible today. The Canadian-American Challenge Cup, better known as Can-Am, had one simple rule. If your car had 2 seats and fenders, almost anything else was allowed. No displacement limits, no horsepower caps, no boost restrictions, no minimum weight tied to engine size. If you could dream it, build it, and make it stick to the track, you could race it. It was an engineer's playground, a place where innovation mattered more than budgets, where creativity could beat tradition, where the rulebook was more suggestion than law. And it was dangerous, not just for drivers, for the entire concept of competition. Because when you remove the limits, someone eventually builds something that breaks the game entirely. McLaren had dominated the early years of Can-Am with big block Chevrolet V8s. Aluminum blocks, massive displacement, the rumble of American muscle channeled through British chassis design. Their orange cars became iconic. Bruce McLaren himself had helped establish the dynasty before his tragic death in 1970. The team carried on, pushing power levels higher and higher. 650 horsepower became the baseline. Then came monsters pushing 700, then 750, then 800. The cars were already absurd. Ground effects were primitive, aerodynamics were evolving rapidly. Tires were struggling to keep up with the power being fed through them. Every year, the lap times dropped. Every year, the danger increased. Every year, the spectacle grew more extreme. But Porsche was watching from Europe, quietly taking notes, studying the regulations, calculating possibilities. They had just finished humiliating the world at Le Mans with the 917, a flat 12 endurance car that could run 24 hours at full throttle without complaint. A car so dominant that the rules were changed specifically to stop it. Sound familiar? The 917 had proven something important. Porsche knew how to build engines that made enormous power and survived punishment that destroyed competitors. They understood reliability at the limit. They understood thermal management under sustained load. They understood what it took to win when everything was on the line. And someone inside Porsche asked a dangerous question. What if we stopped worrying about endurance and focused only on speed? What if we took an engine designed to survive 24 hours and tuned it to survive 200 miles? What if we removed every compromise and built something purely for dominance? That question would change everything. The project started in 1971. By 1972, prototypes were testing. By 1973, the weapon was ready. Porsche didn't start from scratch. They took the heart of the 917, a 180-degree flat 12 engine displacing 4.5 liters, later stretched to 4.9 and eventually to 5.4 liters. The architecture was pure Porsche. Horizontally opposed cylinders keeping the center of gravity low. Air cooling, eliminating the weight and complexity of water jackets. Magnesium and aluminum everywhere weight could be saved. The bore measured 3.43 inches. The stroke was 2.60 inches. Short stroke. Big bore, built to rev, built to breathe. The short stroke meant less piston speed at any given RPM, less stress on connecting rods, less friction on cylinder walls. The engine could spin faster without tearing itself apart. The big bore meant massive valve area. Room for intake ports the size of drain pipes. Room for exhaust valves that could dump spent gases without restriction. In naturally aspirated form, the 917 engine already made over 600 horsepower at around 8,300 RPM. Numbers that would have dominated Can-Am just a few years earlier. But that wasn't enough. Not for what Porsche had in mind. So Porsche did what Porsche always does when rules are loose. They added boost, not one turbocharger. 2. Twin KKK turbochargers, force-feeding 12 cylinders through massive intake plenums. The turbos were sized specifically for the engine's characteristics. Not too small, which would create lag. Not too large, which would sacrifice low-end response. The sizing was deliberate, calculated, optimized through hundreds of hours of dyno testing. Early versions ran around 19 psi of boost, enough to transform the engine's character entirely, enough to push power levels into territory that seemed impossible. Then 22 psi, then more. Compression was dropped to survive it. The pistons were dished. Combustion chambers were opened up. Final compression ratio hovered around 7.51, low enough to prevent detonation under boost, but high enough to stay violent when the turbos spooled. The intercoolers were massive, air-to-air units mounted in the bodywork, fed by dedicated ducting. Every degree of temperature reduction meant more power, more density, more oxygen packed into each cylinder. On the dyno, the numbers started getting uncomfortable. 900 horsepower, then 1,000, then beyond. Engineers would run the engine at full boost and watch the numbers climb. They would look at each other with expressions that mixed pride and fear. This wasn't normal. This wasn't safe. This was something else entirely. By 1973, the final version of this engine, now 5.4 liters, officially known as the Type 917-30, was making over 1,100 horsepower in race trim. And in qualifying, with the boost turned up, engineers whispered numbers closer to 2,500 in the early 1970s. Let that sink in. Modern Formula One cars make around 1,000 horsepower with hybrid systems and decades of development. The 917-30 was making more than that with technology from half a century ago. No hybrid assistance, no energy recovery, just turbocharged fury. The torque figure was just as insane, over 800 pound-feet, arriving like a sledgehammer at mid-RPM. The engine didn't build power gradually. It hit you. Suddenly. Violently. The boost would build, the turbos would spool, and then the world would blur. Tires didn't wear out, they evaporated. Compounds designed to last an entire race would be destroyed in practice sessions. Teams went through rubber at rates that seemed impossible. Gearboxes didn't fail slowly, they exploded. The torque multiplication was more than most transmissions could handle. Porsche had to develop specialized gearboxes just to survive the engine they had created. Drive shafts twisted, half shafts snapped, differential gears stripped. Everything downstream from the engine was operating at the absolute limit of 1970s metallurgy. And the worst part? The engine itself was reliable. That's the detail most people miss. This wasn't a fragile grenade that made power once and then scattered itself across the pavement. This wasn't a qualifying special that needed rebuilding between sessions. This engine survived, race after race, lap after lap, full boost, full power. The engineering was meticulous. dry sump lubrication with multiple scavenge pumps pulling oil from every corner of the crankcase. Nothing could pool, nothing could starve. The system was designed for sustained lateral loads, high RPM, and violent acceleration. The forged crankshaft rode on massive bearings fed by priority oiling straight to the mains. The crank got oil first, before the rods, before the turbos, before anything else. That meant the bottom end survived even when everything else was screaming. The connecting rods were titanium, lighter than steel, stronger than anything conventional, expensive beyond reason, but necessary for what Porsche was attempting. The air-cooled cylinders used finned barrels with Nikasil coatings to survive heat levels that would melt lesser engines. The coating was a Porsche specialty, a nickel silicon carbide layer that provided lubrication and heat resistance simultaneously. Cylinder wall temperatures that would seize a normal engine were just Tuesday for the 917-30. The turbos weren't afterthoughts bolted on as an experiment. They were integrated into the design from the beginning, fed by equal-length exhaust headers that kept pulse energy strong. Every cylinder contributed equally to turbo spool. The exhaust system was a work of art, 12 pipes merging into collectors that fed the turbos without restriction. The packaging was incredibly tight. The heat management was incredibly complex. Boost came on hard but predictably. Drivers learned to anticipate it, to prepare for it. And once it hit, the car didn't accelerate. It teleported. The man tasked with controlling this insanity was Mark Donohue, a driver engineer, calm, analytical, terrifyingly precise. Donohue wasn't just talented behind the wheel. He understood what was happening beneath him. He could feel mechanical problems before they became failures. He could describe chassis behavior in engineering terms. He could suggest changes that made the car faster and explain exactly why they worked. He didn't just drive the car, he understood it. When Donohue first tested the 917-30, he reportedly lifted his foot halfway down the straight, not because the car was unstable, not because something felt wrong, but because he ran out of courage. The acceleration was so violent, so relentless, that his instincts told him to stop. His brain couldn't process speed building that quickly. His experience told him something had to be wrong. Nothing was wrong. The car was just that fast. At full boost, the car could hit 0 to 100 mph in under 5 seconds. That's supercar territory today. In 1973, nothing on public roads could match it. Nothing in racing could either. Top speed depended on gearing, but on long straights, it pushed past 240 mph in a road racing car with fenders, on circuits designed for cars making half the power. The braking zones became compression zones. Drivers had to start slowing down earlier than seemed reasonable. The speed was accumulating too fast. Lap times collapsed overnight. At Road Atlanta, Donohue qualified nearly 4 seconds faster than anyone else. 4 seconds in road racing is an eternity. Races are won and lost by tenths. Championships are decided by hundredths. 4 seconds wasn't a gap. It was an embarrassment. At Riverside, he lapped the entire field, not just the back markers, everyone. Cars that had been competitive the previous year were suddenly running in a different race entirely. At Laguna Seca, the car looked like it was on fast forward, while everyone else was stuck in real time. Spectators laughed. Then they fell silent. Then they just stared. The competition didn't know what to do. They couldn't go faster. They couldn't match the power. They couldn't afford the development. And Porsche wasn't slowing down. And then came the moment that sealed its fate. The 1973 season became a massacre. Out of 8 races, Porsche won 6. Dominant victories, not close finishes. Leads measured in laps, not seconds. And the 2 races they didn't win? Mechanical issues unrelated to the engine's core design, a turbo wastegate, an oil line, small failures in supporting systems. The engine itself never failed. Not once. When the car finished, it dominated. When it didn't finish, it still terrified everyone watching. Even in failure, the 917-30 was the fastest thing on track. Other teams complained quietly at first, then loudly, then desperately, private phone calls to series officials, angry meetings in paddock motorhomes, threats to withdraw, demands for action. How do you compete against something with double your horsepower and better reliability? You don't. You change the rules. But here's the thing. Officially, Can-Am was canceled after 1974 due to rising costs and declining grids. The oil crisis was blamed. Economics, safety concerns, insurance costs, the difficulty of finding sponsors in uncertain times. That's the story you'll usually hear. That's the story that made it into the history books. But insiders knew the truth. No one could build an answer to the 91730 without spending absurd money. The engine alone cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop. The turbo systems, the specialized materials, the testing programs, the failures along the way. Adjusted for inflation, Porsche had sunk millions into the project. Private teams didn't stand a chance. Even factory-backed competitors would need years to catch up. And worse, Porsche wasn't done. Engineers had data showing the block could survive even more boost. The bottom end was overbuilt. There was margin left, room to grow. Stronger pistons were already on the drawing board. Forged units with revised ring packages. Better intercoolers that could drop charge temperatures even further. More aggressive cams that would improve breathing at higher RPM. There were credible fears the engine could push beyond 1,600 horsepower in a series with no limits. The 91730 wasn't at its peak. It was still climbing. So limits were coming. Proposed rule changes included fuel restrictions that would neuter the engine's appetite, turbo boost caps that would cut power in half, weight penalties specifically targeting cars with forced induction, minimum weight formulas that would require Porsche to add ballast, not subtle changes, not balanced regulations, rules designed specifically to stop one car. Porsche saw the writing on the wall, they understood what was happening. The series was going to be redesigned around preventing their success. Every innovation would be met with a new restriction. Every advantage would be legislated away. Rather than neuter their creation, they walked away. The engine didn't fail. It wasn't beaten. It wasn't replaced by something faster. It was legislated out of existence. And just like that, one of the most powerful racing engines ever built disappeared from competition. The 91730 ran its final race in 1973. Can-Am limped along for another season with declining fields. By 1974, the series was effectively dead. Some blamed economics. Some blamed the oil crisis. Some blamed changing tastes. But everyone in the paddock knew the real reason. When you build something that breaks competition entirely, competition stops. The engine didn't lose, racing lost. But its legacy didn't die. In 1975, Porsche took lessons from the 91730 and applied them to the 911 Turbo, priority oiling systems that kept bearings alive under boost, turbo durability improvements learned from racing at the limit, thermal management strategies developed in the crucible of Can-Am, concepts born from a 2,100 horsepower monster found their way into road cars. Cars that customers could buy, cars that established Porsche's reputation for turbocharged performance. The 930 Turbo became an icon, and its DNA traced directly back to a race engine that was too fast to race. Meanwhile, the surviving 91730 engines became legends, museum pieces in Porsche's collection, demonstration weapons at historic events, objects of obsession for collectors. At Goodwood, one famously spun its tires at over 100 mph during a hill climb run. On partial throttle, the driver was barely pushing, and still the car was too much for the surface, the conditions, the laws of physics. At Laguna Seca reunions, the sound alone draws crowds. People who weren't born when the car raced come to hear it run, to feel the vibration in their chests, to understand what made it special. Today, when one fires up, the sound is unreal. Not a scream, not a roar, something else entirely. A deep mechanical howl layered with the whistle of twin turbos inhaling the atmosphere. The wastegates chatter between shifts. The exhaust crackles on overrun. It doesn't sound angry. It sounds inevitable, like something that can't be stopped, only delayed. Collectors value the complete cars at well over $10 million. Some estimates go higher. Auctions rarely see them because owners don't sell. But the engine is the real prize, the heart of the legend, a piece of engineering so extreme that racing couldn't survive it. Porsche doesn't build 91730 engines anymore. The tooling is gone, the knowledge is scattered, the materials are obsolete. Each surviving engine is irreplaceable, a time capsule from an era when someone asked, "What if?" and refused to stop at a reasonable answer. Most engines are remembered for how much they won. Championships, races, records. This one is remembered for what it destroyed, an entire series, an era of freedom, and the illusion that racing could exist without limits. Because when something gets too fast, too dominant, too perfect, it doesn't get beaten, it gets banned. Regulations appear, rules change. The thing that was winning is defined out of existence. That's the real lesson of the 91730. Power creates fear. Fear creates rules. Rules create the illusion of fairness. And somewhere in a climate-controlled garage, the most terrifying racing engine ever built sits silent, waiting. Because machines don't know they've been banned. They only know what they were built to do, and this one was built to win. And that's the real story of the engine that was simply too fast for the 1970s. If you enjoyed this deep dive, let me know in the comments what engine or racing legend you want to hear about next. And make sure to subscribe, because there are more machines like this out there, buried by history, waiting to be uncovered.